A very good evening to one and all present here. We are here today to celebrate the occasion of our country's National Education Day. Today, the 11th of November, marks the birth anniversary of Maulana Kalam Azad, the first Education Minister of India. Born in Mecca in 1988, his father was a scholar from Delhi who moved to Mecca during Sepoy Mutiny. After returning to India in 1890 with his family, Mr. Azad was homeschooled, where he mastered several languages including Urdu, Hindi, Persian, Arabic, and English. At 12, Malana Azad was running a library, a reading room, a debating society, and at 14, he was teaching a class of students twice his age, and by 16, he was publicizing a poetic journal and was the editor of the weekly. He rose to prominence as journalist criticizing the British Raj and supporting Indian national movements. Later, he became the leader of the Khilafat movement, which brought him to the close contact of Mahatma Gandhiji. During this period, Azad became an enthusiast supporter of India's ideas of non-violent civil disobedience and worked to organize a non-cooperative movement in the protest of 1919 Revolt Act. Uh, he became the youngest person to serve as the president of Indian National Congress at the age of 35. As the most prominent Muslim leader to oppose the creation of Pakistan, Mr. Azad remained a close confidant and supporter and advisor to the Prime Minister Nehru. Under his leadership, the first Indian Institute of Technology was established along with the University Grants Commission. He also laid emphasis on the development of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and the Faculty of Technology of Delhi University. He further founded Sangeet Natak Academy in 1953, Sahitya Academy in 1954, and Lalit Kala Academy in 1954, and to promote education and culture in the country. Malana Abul Kalam Azad served the country from 1947 to 1958 as the first Prime Minister of Education in Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's cabinet. In 1992, he was posthumously awarded the Bharat Ratna for his contribution as a freedom fighter and educationalist. There are several institutes named in his honor, and it is with great pride that we commemorate his birthday with one of the most important aspects of life and education. Uh, to give us his profound insights on India's education policy, now we have Professor Dr. A.K. Bakthavatsalam, a HAG professor and the head of training and placement cell of NIT Trichy, starting off his career with an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from IIT Madras. He profoundly pursued his direct PhD in energy studies from IIT Delhi, a hybrid academy by choice. He chose to shift to academia after spending close to 17 years in steel industry. In academia too, he has been uniquely fortunate to play crucial roles of bridging industries and academia. Apart from being certified energy auditor, he is also a certified trainer and MBTI administrator, a spread he truly enjoys. He also considers inducing and motivating students into societic outreach activities to his calling. It is with great pride that now I invite Sir to speak his mind on education, India's education policy. Over to you, sir.
Uh, Thank you, Sai. Thanks to the Office of Student Welfare and the Student Council for inviting me to give this talk on this special day, the National Education Day, commemorating the birth of the first Minister of Education of independent India. So there's so much that one can talk about this gentleman, Maulana Azad. Probably, some of the points that I mentioned at 12, he was running a library. At 40, at 15, he was taking a class for people roughly twice his age. A very precocious person. He had special interest in a variety of subjects: mathematics, journalism, poetry, and so on and so forth. And he, of course, had very special and deep interest in education. And there are a few more trivia, so to speak, of him. There have been so many HRD ministers or Minister of Education that the country has had. But it is Maulana Azad who held the position for the longest period, from 1948 to 1958 or so. For little over a decade, he was the education minister of independent India. So it's only fit and appropriate that we talk about him today. And we will start with probably a small quiz. There's an NIT which is named after Maulana Azad. All of you would know, right? So NIT Bhopal, Maulana Azad National Institute of Technology, Bhopal, is named after him. And he, as I said, he had a lot of interest in maths, and then his birth and death days are little special. 1111, that is 11th November, was his birth day, and then he died on 22nd February 222. So that is how this national, the first Minister of Education of India was a precocious person as he was. And then, as the quote that I put there, you can see, he was out and out, so much deep interest he had in education. So we move on to talk about how he shaped the education policy of India, and then the past, present, and even the future, the education policy that India has, pretty much he has had a role to play in that. So on this little background, we just want to talk about the national education policy itself. UNESCO sometime back, commissioned a study on, education for life. And that committee came up with 4 pillars of education, meaning education to know, to acquire a body of knowledge, education to do, to acquire skill sets, education to, connect with people, interdependence and things like that. And finally, education to be, in the sense to take on responsibility, to hold be committed to the society, and so on. So these 4 pillars is what UNESCO study commissioned, and pretty much the education policy that Maulana Azad, the vision that he had for India, and pretty much all the education policy of all countries essentially rest on these 4 pillars of knowing, doing, and relating, and being. So this is how the 4 pillars of education was defined. And pretty much our policy is also based on that. So the next few minutes I'll just run you through in terms of how the education policy has evolved in our country. It started with the immediately post-independent era. So it started with secondary education policy, then it moved on. Then the significant policy was the Kothari Commission somewhere in the 60s. And then the next significant policy was the National Policy of Education in 1986. And then the most significant policy is the current National Education Policy 2020, NEP 2020. We'll quickly see how these things have moved over the years. So the post-independent vision for India was in terms of building a pluralistic society. And if people talk about the Nehruvian vision for India, the man who translated that vision into action and execution was Maulana Azad. So if we see the IITs and IIMs, the NITs were little younger to these institutes, but soon after independence, 1951, the first IIT came up, or the steps were taken, Maulana Azad was the man who was behind execution of that. He took very keen interest in development of the IISC and so on. And then basically the focus was on self-reliant and modern India. That is how he envisioned. And just another piece of trivia, even Jamia Millia Islamia, where director ma'am comes from, he was the man who started Jamia Millia Islamia. Initially, it was started in Aligarh or Agra, I don't recall, and then moved to Delhi. So the post-independence vision was essentially a pluralistic society and self-reliant and modern India. Then came the Kothari Commission that I was talking about. So where some kind of a consolidation, and then free and compulsory education was the main pillar, and eradicating illiteracy and providing adult education. So this was the next set of policy measures that were taken. And then we move on to the next. Can you move to the next slide, Pooja? So then came, I was talking about the 1986 National Policy on Education. This was essentially to prepare India for the 21st century. The emphasis here was change and the normal linear expansion. We are all used to having things in a linear fashion. And if time permits, I'll talk about the non-linearity that we should adopt in our education system, in our NIT possibly little later. So 1986, people wanted to move away from this linear expansion. And they also said that the current pace and nature of improvement cannot meet with the demands of the situation. So they wanted much faster changes to happen. And therefore, finances were important. You needed money essentially to tackle the problems of access and quality. So this was a major shift post-independence, then the Kothari Education Commission, and then the 1986 National Policy on Education. So just to trace from the 1986 to 2020 today, in between we had this Right to Education Act. There's some policy modification 1992 and 2009, and then today we have the 2020 NEP 2020. One major factor that we have to bear in mind in terms of the change that has happened between the previous policy and the current policy is that this policy is coming a good 3.5 decades after the 1986 National Policy on Education. Now, 3.5 decades is a fairly large timeline, but timeline apart, the major change or transformation that has happened between 1986 and today is 1986 was an era that was just about the time when the internet revolution was started happening. And the people who formulated the 1986 policy, although they recognized, they acknowledged the role of technology in education, at 1986 people were not able to foresee the kind of changes that technology can impact in all fields, including education. And when I say education, I'm not just referring to teaching learning process. I am referring to governance, administration, and everything. So this is one major shift that has happened between 1986 and today. 1986, I know I can talk for myself. I was a student, just completing my graduation. And that was the time when things were, computers and internet and all that started coming into existence. So that is a major shift. So the 2020 policy factors or takes into account a lot of these tectonic shift that has happened in terms of technology. And all these, even without knowledge of technology, Maulana Kalam Azad was able to kind of visualize many of these way back in the 40s and 50s, right? So this is a major shift that has happened. So vision of the NEP 2020 is, okay, like many other vision statements, it's about transforming into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society, that we need to be a global knowledge power that we are, right? Okay. Yeah, move on. So whenever we talk about any policy, talking about policy, if at a student level, policy may not mean much to you. For a 20-year-old or around that, policy may not mean much. But as you move up in the organization, as you start working, as you move up in the organization, there are 3 levels at which organizations operate. I call it the PMO, not the Prime Minister's office. The PMO would stand for, going up from the bottom rung, O for operations. So that is where a fresh youngster, entry level engineer, manager, whatever you call, would be operational aspects of the organization. So on top of the operational aspects of the organization sits the management part, managing things. Now, on top of this management sits the policy measures. So policy, management, and operation. That is how the hierarchy works. So any policy today, any major policy today is closely linked to the SDGs. I don't know if you've heard about the SDGs. The SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. So the United Nations has stipulated the Sustainable Development Goals for the entire world. And there are in all 17 SDGs, which include care for life underwater, life on land, poverty, diversity, gender parity, eradication of hunger. It goes on. There are 17 SDGs. And I thought it is important that you must know that amongst these 17 SDGs, SDG 4 pertains to education. So SDG, we need to understand that our NEP is also linked to these United Nations SDGs. So it talks about early childcare development. We'll just talk about it a little later. It talks about technical vocational education. The national education policy lays a lot of emphasis on vocational education, which Maulana Azad was able to see in the 50s itself. He did talk about vocational education in the early 50s. Gender disparities that I talked about, and all youth and substantial proportion of adults should have literacy and numeracy. So these are some of the things that the NEP and its linkage to SDG. So a few lines straight out of NEP, which you can just hold it here for a few minutes, Pooja. So these are no. You can run it through. You can run. I mean, yeah. Hold the slide here. So one of the things that you must know when we're talking about the national education policy is that the NEP is very, very strong in terms of converting all universities into multidisciplinary universities. All higher education institutions need to become large multidisciplinary universities. This is the highest recommendation of this policy. What does that mean? We will, we'll see that in a minute. And in fact, NEP, very clearly says single stream higher education institutions, which means institutes like the IITs and NITs have to become multidisciplinary institutions. Right? And we've got to deliver more holistic and multidisciplinary education. More areas, arts and humanities will become part of NIT Trichy. In fact, I keep telling here to my colleagues here, to my faculty colleagues here, that today we are National Institute of Technology. But in the next few years, as we move forward implementing NEP and as we start incorporating more and more of varied fields, arts, science, more of science, humanities. Maybe we might have a medical college here. Maybe we will have a pharmacy college, a school of pharmacy. Maybe we'll have a school of agriculture here, given the 800-acre campus that we have. These are realities, not true in the distant future. These things could happen. And as and when these things happen, we may not call ourselves National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. We might just become NIT Trichy. Like many years back, ITC was Indian Tobacco Company. Today, ITC is not Indian Tobacco. ITC is ITC. That's it. ITC is not Indian Tobacco Company. So we might become NIT Trichy instead of National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli, as we start, expanding more and more fields, which are alien to us as we speak today, right? So the NEP also talks in a very big way about the universities, higher education institutions engaging with the community engagement and service, and environmental and value-based education. All these are major salient features that the NEP talks about. So, can you move to the next one? Okay. So the other thing that NEP talks in a big way is about increasing the gross enrollment ratio. So I'm not going into the details of what GE are. I just want to create some awareness amongst you all. Some of you might take to academics later, and then you need to have an awareness. So GER, as it is called, our GER is 26.3%. And the goal is to take this GER to 50% by 2035. So towards this end, the NEP talks about online education in a big way. NEP talks about, starting education departments within institutes like IITs and NITs. NEP also talks about establishing a national research foundation or fund, just on the lines of NSF that it's there in the United States. So there's a lot of focus on research. NEP gives a lot of focus on research. Again, way back in the 50s, Maulana Azad had this vision of, India doing its own research and development. In fact, he was instrumental in, to a great extent, in the development of IAC, although he did not start the IAC, but instrumental in a great way in the development of IAC. Next. So, just to put it in short, the NEP talks about holistic development. It talks about social, intellectual, spiritual, moral, physical, and emotional development. Holistic development of students or individuals, as it talks in a big way. Yeah. So these are like some high-level points as to what the NEP talks about. So again, I'm just dropping a few terms here and there for you to just register in your mind, and then ruminate over it, and then read about it as and when you get an opportunity to read about it, or you come across it. So as I said, the funding or the spending for education in India is less. Hardly 3% of our GDP goes for education. The target is 6%. And we talked about GER going up from 26% to 30%. And internationalization is another area where we are weak. And similarly, the kind of the spending that goes into the education sector itself. Yeah, next. So yeah, so we talked about this multidisciplinary education. You can just move on to, I'll touch on this on a later slide. So again, NEP talks about multidisciplinary education and research universities. MERU, MERU is a term that NEP talks about. Yeah, you can move next. So I'm not going to touch on this. You can move to the next one. This is about administration of universities. May not be so much relevant for students, but broadly, just keep that visual, the previous one. Yeah, just keep it there. So broadly, I just want to know that without getting into details, broadly, there will be three kinds of universities as we go along: the research universities, teaching universities, and autonomous colleges. They'll be classified into three, and then there'll be migration from one level to another level. Yeah, next. And NEP also talks in a big way about financial support for students, particularly the SEDG groups. I mean, socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. NEP talks about and expanding the scholarship portal. It is talking about, and we are in India. We are not so much used to the term freeship. We are used to the term scholarship. In the coming years, we will hear more and more this word called freeship. So, education might be costly, but along with that, there will also be a lot of scholarships and freeships. So, financial support for students is something that the NEP is talking about. Yeah, just one point here. The NEP again talks a lot about our Indian knowledge system, language, culture, and values. NEP specifically talks about starting Indian institutes of translation and interpretation. And further, NEP says that these large multidisciplinary universities, which NIT Trichy would become in the coming years, will have an IITI within the institute. 5 years from now, today all these sound little far-fetched, but no. Today they are actually true. They are policy statements, but the way the government is going about implementing these. 5 years from now, within NIT, we might have a IITI, which is an Indian Institute of Translation and Interpretation, that kind of a thing. And it's culture, language, all these are intertwined. And, they are talking about mother tongue, local language as a medium of instruction, all these things. The NEP gives a lot of emphasis and focus. Yeah, next. Internationalization we talked about. Today we have students from NRIs, foreign nationals, ICCR, and all that. But in the coming years, probably we will have a lot more students from all over the globe, residing in our campus, studying at NIT Trichy. So this is something that. So financing, I talked about GDP. How we need to India as a nation. We are looking at more spend for education from 3.1% of GDP to 6.6% of GDP. Yeah. So the key proposals, we'll just, I think I'll just see, I'll explain them quickly in the respective. Yeah, next. So this is something I wanted all of you to just know a little bit. So there's a lot of, this is about school education. That we might think that, or we might say we are higher education, but the point is we need to know how our school education system is. Currently, we all used to the 10+2 system, right? Incidentally, I belong to the second batch of 10+2 in CBSE. So before that, it was not 10+2 system, right? So, but then, a whole generation has moved studying in the 10+2 system. So now it is not changing anything in a big way. The new structure is about what they call as 5+3+3+4. So the 5 would include the pre-KG, KG, LKG, UKG, plus first and second standard. So up to 6 years or so, 5-6 years. And then you have the preparatory, which is class 3 to 5, and then 6 to 8 is middle, and then the secondary is 9 to 12, and which is divided into 9th and 10th in one phase, and 11th and 12th in another phase. Essentially, what we have today, excepting that there is going to be a lot of focus on the foundational stage, which is the 5 years that they're talking about. 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. The 5 that they're talking about is pre-KG, LKG, UKG, first standard, and second standard. Why is it important? It is important because there's a lot of study which say 85% of the brain development of a child happens within 6 years of age. 85% of brain development of a child happens within 6 years of age. And if that has to happen, there has to be all-round early childhood care as they call it. Right? And so there's going to be a lot of things that is happening around Anganwadis, pre-KGs and things like that. And nutrition for the child is extremely, extremely important if we have to have a generation of children growing up with good nutrition and therefore growing with good brain development, because 85% of the brain development happens within the first 6 years. There's a lot of things that are going to happen there, and I'm coming from this state of Tamil Nadu, I'm happy and proud that almost since the 50s or 60s probably, Tamil Nadu has always had the noon meal scheme, and that is one of the reasons why the literacy rate or the GER of Tamil Nadu is already 50% today. Something that as a nation we are trying to strive for by 2035. Tamil Nadu's GER is 50%. Probably partly one can attribute it to the early childhood care, that the policies that were taken in the 60s, early 60s with noon meal scheme and so on and so forth. But then there's a lot of focus that is here. And as responsible citizens, I thought you all must know our responsibility towards developing that next generation of children with good nutrition and brain development. Okay. So I just wanted to spend a little time on this. Yeah, next, Pooja. So this is something that is important for you. So we know about credit-based system, nothing new. There's something called academic bank of credits, which is which will happen. So you do a course somewhere, earn some credits, and then put it in your ABC, as it is called, academic bank of credit. So and then you can draw it elsewhere, and then you can take assortment of credits and then earn a diploma or a certification or a degree. So that is flexible in true sense is what we are moving towards. And then it is also talking about entry-exit options, multiple entry-exit options. I'll just talk about it a little later, few slides down the line. I'll explain it with what IIT Madras has done so that you have an understanding of what this multiple entry-exit option is. Yeah, next. And this is not so much relevant for us because the degree program is changing from 3 years to 4 years. Like for example, your BCom, BSc, all that might become 4 years. So for us, it's not so much of an impact, but generally speaking. So I talked about catalyzing academic research with National Research Foundation. A lot of funding that is going to happen there. Okay, yeah. Next. Next. You can just move to the next slide. Yeah. Just click once more. Okay, right. So I said I'll talk about multiple entry exit options. So this is what it is. IIT Madras, I'm just speaking this example because to give an understanding of how this multiple entry exit option works. So IIT Madras, you might know, has started a BSc in data science, online BSc in data science, right? So how many students are enrolled for this course? 10,000 students are enrolled for this course. When they started this course last year, how many applications they received? 50,000 applications. Now, what is special about this? what is special about this is that, you enroll for this course, do a set of courses, complete the foundational level, you exit with a certificate. You are a working professional, you exit with a certificate. You don't have the time, you are transferred, you go on site, and the work demands there are different. So you exit with a certificate. Now 2 years down the line, you come back, right? Or you have some time. Now you enter. You exited there, you enter, you do another set of courses, right? Complete another set of courses, and the previous set of courses which you can draw from the ABC, and there's another set of courses that you've done. Now you earn a diploma. If you have time, you continue to do some more courses and then earn a degree. If you don't have time, you are, you just got married, you're raising a family or whatever, you exit with a diploma. And then 2 years down the line, you have time, you come back, do another set of courses, and then get your degree. Now, these are things, they sound little, utopian, but no, these things are happening elsewhere in the world, and these things will happen. This thing is happening right there at IIT Madras, and we will not be too far behind. So I just wanted to spend little time on this entry exit option. Yeah, move. Yeah, okay. So you can move on. I think for want of time, I'll just move on. So I just hold here for a minute. So yeah. So I think it's time we started looking at 5-year integrated bachelor's master's degree, like the IITs have, the 5-year MTech program that they have, or like what BITS Pilani has, the dual degrees. Someone earns MSc Mathematics and BE Chemical Engineering. Or someone can do, we can even have a combination of MA in English and BTech in computer science or whatever, right? So these kinds of things that are there elsewhere, the policy is talking about these things. Again, things will happen very soon here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you complete the yeah. Okay. So yeah. So probably I think I'll just talk on this and then I'll pause. I'll stop. So if you recall, right at the beginning, I talked about linear growth is not sufficient. And I said I'll talk about non-linearity that we need to look at, right? So just take a look at this little visual here. Typically our learning is how it happens, our present setup. First semester, second semester, third semester, blah, 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 it goes. And then finally we come to the 8th semester, we have a project. And in the project, what happens? We have members from the same class, right? If I'm doing my BTech in mechanical engineering, so I have 2 or 3 other students with whom I will, we'll be doing my project together. Now, just flip this a little bit, and then the proposed setup is, faculty has a project. Spider, some project is happening. Scient, people are, using Scient to do a project. Designers Consortium, something. Sangam, some people are doing a project. Smart India Hackathon, somebody is doing a project. Toycathon, there is somebody doing a project. Now, why can't these projects happen, let's say, starting from first semester? I mean, it need not be first semester. It can be first semester, second semester, third semester, anything. Why can't it run concurrent with the semester, different semesters? And why can't we have members in a project team from different years? Not just from different years. Why can't we have members in a project team from different branches? Why can't a chemical engineering student combine with a chemistry student and a ECE student? Multidisciplinary is what we're talking about, right? So these kind of changes, we are talking about, and things will happen as we move along. to have that more of experiential learning and then non-linearized student projects. Okay, yeah. So there we go. So in a nutshell, uh, what all does the policy talk about? It talks about 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, the school education, where 5 is, I told you, pre-KG, LKG, UKG, first standard and second standard. Early child care is what we're talking about. National Research Foundation, multidisciplinary and holistic education, a conceptual understanding instead of rote learning that we have largely today, more formative assessment, multiple entry exit options, technology integration into everything that we do, life skills, vocational education, skill development, then knowledge development, more focus on vocational and skill development, critical thinking. So of course the HRD ministry has already become education ministry, experiential learning, Higher Education Council of India, that is about the administration, which I skipped because it's not so much relevant for students. So this is in a nutshell what the policy talks about. And so what better time and day to kind of share some of these things with our students and some faculty and colleagues who have joined in to talk about on a day other than the birth anniversary of Maulana Kalam Azad, the first Minister of Education of independent India, who held the position for a little over a decade. And he not only envisioned, the past, present, and even the future. He had the vision, and a lot of vision that he had is today part of the national education policy that we have today in the form of NEP 2020. So with these words, I close here. Thank you. And a salute to the first education minister of India, Maulana Azad. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your wonderful presentation, sir. I'm so sure all of us must have learned a great deal and will continue to take your thoughts forward. We'll now be concluding with a word of thanks from Anirudh, Technical Secretary of NIT Trichy. Over to you, Anirudh.
Firstly, I would like to begin by extending my gratitude to Bakthavatsalam sir for taking his time and his extremely insightful talk about the origins of India's educational policy and also his thoughts on the future of education and also giving us a glimpse into the actual application that colleges like IIT Madras are taking up. We hope to see NIT Trichy also take up big strides into reaching the potential of a top IIT as well. I would also like to say a really big thank you to the Office of the Dean of Student Welfare, Kumresan sir, Associate Dean Gerald sir, SAS officers Dali sir, for their presence and continuous support, not just for this event but to the Students Council and the Technical Council. And obviously, lastly, I would like to thank the members of the Students' Council and the Technical Council for ensuring the smooth conduct of today's event. I also want to thank all the participants who attended this meet, and we hope that you guys got a great insight into what the future holds in the field of education. Thank you, one and all, for tuning in.